So you're going to make a short film for a little to no budget. Maybe you have the lend of some cameras and equipment from your university. You have yourself, your friends, or maybe some drama students as actors if you're lucky. You want to get the music right for your short film, but you have no idea where to start. Welcome to EIFF Youth's Guide to Film Music for Filmmakers, with your own personal composer to guide you, me, Simon Toner. First up, where do I get free music, you might ask? The first and the best option, in my opinion, would be to go and find a student composer who would be interested in composing the music for your short film, maybe as part of their portfolio for the work they need to do for university anyways. They're often happy to score your film for free and may have access to a studio, B, some musicians, and yeah, they might be able to go and record it all for free. A producer's note would be that in order to have the film ready to go to film festivals, you need to ask your composer to sign a synchronization license, which is just a contract giving the filmmaker the license to use the composer's music that they compose for the film. The Musicians Union has some really good specimen synchronization licenses. There's one for the master, which is the recording, and another which is for the publishing, which is the composition. But that's for you producer guys. So the next thing, the next way of getting free music would be to put on your detective hat and go searching in the Creative Commons, which is also known as the public domain. You can use websites like publicdomainsherpa.com, which will be sure to send you on your way through various internet archives where each recording is labeled with a license that the creator has selected. There's plenty of OK music, which has been uploaded by people now, but the best finds are found by hunting for what I would call the old dead white male, which is recordings which have gone out of copyright as their term has expired, often written by someone pre-1920s. Often a vinyl recording and classical music, orchestral music, choirs, that sort of thing. So a producer's note for this would be to make sure that you pay attention to what the license says you can or can't do with the recording. We want to make sure that we can use it commercially because we want it to be able to show the film in a cinema if at the end of the day. Cool. The next one up would be we could pay for some library music or possibly find some free library music. Library music is music which is held in music libraries online. They specialize in selling licenses to recordings. The cheaper libraries and the free stuff won't be by recognizable artists and will be a kind of like mood music. We often hear library music in TV adverts. Composers will write music and then put it up on a library as a way of gaining some passive income. Or it might be that they work for a company that produces jingles for ads. And the music won't be as tailored to the scene as it would be if you worked with a composer. But with a skilled music editor or music supervisor who can like choose, license, and then edit a piece of music, you can get some really great results. And you only need to look at the films of Quentin Tarantino to see how you can use licensed music really well. But fortunately for Quentin Tarantino, he's got lots of money to be able to throw out licensing all sorts of different music. So not always the cheap way to do things, but can be quite good. The fourth and the last way of getting free music would be to contact a band or artist with a lovingly crafted letter or email, letting them know you're their biggest fan and that you love their piece of music and asking them if you would let you use their music for free or maybe for a little bit less than it's worth. Be prepared to never get a reply. I've done this before for a couple of films. For the producers out there, make sure that you've got every bit of emotional blackmail at the ready to put into that email because you're going to need it. And you never know, they might just let you use some music. Next up, what composers do and how to talk to them. I'm going to go through a step-by-step guide of how I compose a film, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what it is I'm doing, and also talk a little bit about how do you collaborate with a composer? And I'll bring in our fantastic filmmaker, Duncan Forbes, to have a little talk about that at the end. Or in the middle, in fact. So first of all, when I get a film, as early as possible, preferably before the filming, I'll read the script or watch a rough edit, and I'll talk to the director about their intent for the film and how music could serve the tone they want to imbue in the film Or put a little bit more simply, how can the music serve the film? Often we talk about characters and how we as the audience relate to them. Directors sometimes can have a little bit of difficulty, though, explaining what they're looking for in the music. Because it is a bit difficult to describe what the music is going to do. So here's some tips from me as a composer. So as composers, we are here to talk about your film and its story, and the music should always be serving the film. So when you're talking to a composer, talk about what the film means and what you wanted it to be when you set out to make it, where it's at now and what it has become. You can talk about how characters feel and your intent for how the audience will feel about a character. One way of doing that is to set out the major plot points, themes, and moments in the film. The composer is here to accentuate the arc of the story for the audience. So the big thing is, don't worry about using musical terms. Explaining what you want to happen in the scene is much more useful. And a good composer will only need that. They just need you to say, this is what we want to happen in the scene, and this is my goal. So providing your composer with a playlist of music can really put across an idea of what it is you're looking for, because after all, music speaks where language fails us, and often it can be really difficult to explain exactly what it is you're looking for. And much easier just to show a piece of music and that'll put everything across that you're looking for. Most of all, share your enthusiasm for the film and look at your composer as a partner in crime, another enthusiastic person who wants to help tell the story of the film. The music is another the music as another unique element which can become part of the character of your film. So Duncan and I, we collaborated recently on his film Pizza Boy, which we're going to get to watch later on in the video. So it'd be great to bring him in now to talk a little bit about that. So, hey Duncan.
Hi.
Hey. So was this your first time working with a composer, and how did you find talking about the film with me?
Yeah, it was my first time working with any composer. I've not even worked for like a friend before who does music, so it was definitely new to me. And what you were saying about you don't need to use musical terms. That was definitely something that I found helpful, because when I first kind of started chatting to you, I was like, this guy's going to know so much more about music than me, and I'm going to look like an idiot who knows nothing, because I'm not a particularly musically talented person. But yeah, I felt pretty soon into the process that we were kind of on the same wavelength about what we wanted to do with the film. You know, yeah, you kind of you looked at the film and then you said, hey, this is a piece of music that I think we could be inspired by, and I think it was the Twin Peaks theme. And then I kind of was like, yeah. And also when I was making the film, I was inspired by the Taxi Driver theme, and I think like straight away we both just kind of understood what we were going for. So yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a moment when we both sort of realized that the theme from Taxi Driver was like both of our favorite scores, and we are just like, oh, Duncan, it was meant to be. There we go. So yeah, nice one. Good to hear that. So yeah, next up, and returning to what I would do in terms of composing with a film, the next stage would be I would create a palette of sounds, which is what I kind of did with you, Duncan, and I would send some initial ideas through to sort of see whether we're on we're getting towards the tone that we're looking for. And that can be before, during, or after filming. It just depends on the process. And it provides an opportunity for like a sort of creative feedback loop if you get involved early enough, because the director's influencing the music by having this sort of discussion that we had. But also, if you have the music at an early stage, it can start to influence parts of how the film and the characters develop. I know from talking to a few editors that some of them really enjoy being able to have the final music so they can edit the film together with the music rather than using, say, a temporary piece of music you're going to change later on. So after that, I get the picture lock edit, which is another way of describing the final edit of the film. And I begin adding music to picture and send drafts through to the director when queries arrive. And if I am going to do a studio session at the end with real musicians, I work towards producing a mock-up of the score, which is like a version of the music, but with sample instruments that I'll create here in my studio at my computer, and playing things like the double bass back there, and yeah, I'll do that, and then hopefully at the end get some musicians in the studio to record it. And yeah, as the process is different with every film, I've recorded music in a studio session before the film was finished. And so in that instance, I composed more music than we needed so that I could go through the picture lock edit and match the music to the picture, making edits to the recorded audio. And that way of working gives a surprising amount of flexibility. And yeah, alternatively, I've also waited until the film was at the picture lock edit before recording the studio session, which meant I could have a pretty set idea of how the music was going to fit the film. And thanks to music editing technology, nothing is ever set in stone. So if we have a piece of music, we can go back through and chop it up and make sure it fits way on late on in the process. And often there isn't a studio full of musicians waiting to record the music for the film, unfortunately, if only. So a lot of time it'll be me recording the music myself in the studio. And this way of working means that I may not need to produce a mock up as I was with the other way of working. And I can send through my newest draft of the actual music. So, yeah, by this point, we'll have a finished score after some of this drafting that we've been doing. And I'll have that mixed and send it through to either the sound designer or the editor, who then mixes all the audio, which includes the dialogue, the foley, and the music, and compiles the film into a final file which can be sent to anyone who wants to screen it. And so the very last stage, of course, is we'd all go and see the film together, and hopefully there'll be an audience there to enjoy it as well. So yeah, that sums up the basic sort of process for composing a film for me as a composer. So next up, I'm quite excited because we're going to get to watch a bit of Pizza Boy, Duncan Forbes's film. And we're going to talk a little bit about how music can subvert the experience of the film. So, Duncan, can you introduce this clip? What is going to be going on in this clip? The first one I'm going to show is the original one with no music on it.
Well, the film in general is it's called Pizza Boy, as we've said, and it's about a guy who answers phones at a pizza delivery, and one night he hears something quite mysterious, a scream in the background, and being quite a natural detective, he decides to investigate. The whole film was inspired by I used to work at a Chinese takeaway, and I never heard a scream, but you heard some like suspicious things just in the background, and that's kind of where I got the idea. But the clip you're about to see, essentially, it's from when he leaves work that night at the takeaway, having heard this scream, he decides instead of going home, he's going to investigate, make sure everything's okay. So in the clip, he's approaching this house, and he looks in the windows and he can't quite get in. So it's him trying to get into this house, check everything's all right. But he's slowly becoming a bit more and more vulnerable, and we kind of show that through the lighting and such, and the camera angles. But yeah.
So yeah, we got the original version, no music on it, quite a tense tone, and we saw the main character is his name George. Remember?
Yeah, it's George.
Yeah, we're referring to him as George, and George has made his way into the house at that point in the clip. So this original silent treatment is kind of interesting because silence sort of makes us pay attention to some more of the little sounds that are happening in the scene. And it can be quite good as a composer to use it as a tool. Sometimes the best way to score a scene is no music at all, especially if you've had music. You can then take away the music and it can have this pretty impactful effect. So the film stands up pretty well even without any music, but we're going to see how adding different music and using some of the different free music sources we talked about are can change the way that we experience the film. So the next up is going to be our old white dead male treatment, or the Creative Commons public domain one. So it's going to be some old music that we're going to use in this one. And because the film is filmed in black and white, it has a sort of timeless quality. So in a way, this old music sort of works. It's quite absurd and maybe a little bit funny to have this. It brings something comedic to it. But yeah, let's have a little watch of that and we can have a talk about that one afterwards. Very different treatment, wasn't it? Yeah, what did you make of that one, Duncan? A little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, there is a not comedic aspect, but a slightly out of date aspect to it. But I do quite enjoy it, especially because it is a black and white film and the footage is a little grainy. It almost feels like it could be from years ago. Uh, and you almost expect to see like title cards popping up. But I think it works quite well to kind of push the scene forward a bit. It definitely makes it go quicker than no music at all.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's got a lot of propulsion to it. It's almost like an army theme. It feels like a patriotic wartime thing. The original clip had a bunch of like choirs singing in German, which is a little bit uncomfortable to listen to. But yeah, that was what that one was, and really adds something strange to the scene. But yeah, as you say, like because it's black and white, we've kind of got this opportunity to pull from anywhere, and if it sounds a little bit grainy and not quite like perfect, it sort of fits a little bit with that black and white quality. So yeah, up next we have the library music option, and so we can see that. Hopefully, when we listen to this, you'll see that at points the music's going to work with the scene, and then others it might clash a little bit, or it might not have the intended effect because a lot of the time with library music it's sort of one steady mood, and this piece of music that I found is sort of one steady thing which gets more and more intense as it goes on, and it's really going to be a very different tone to the previous one. But let's have a little watch of that. Yeah, so like it builds right up, and then cuts out, and then we have that opening shot where he opens the door, and that was the silent moment. So pretty different to the last one. You got anything that you'd like to say about that one, Duncan?
Nothing you haven't really said. They just the I like how it builds up and then kind of cuts, and you get that creak of the door, which I didn't actually add. That was just the noise that my door made. Yeah, I think I should probably grease them up or something. But yeah, no, I think it worked really well, especially at the start of the scene with the missing person poster. kind of the street, I think it just works quite well as he's approaching the house.
It builds up a sense of tension. It kind of makes it feel a lot more horror like, almost like it changed the genre a little bit from the last one. Feels a lot more like something is about to jump out at us, potentially that kind of like jump and shock horror sort of thing. Um, but yeah, very different. Okay, so next up we have the option of licensing some music from a band for free. And so this example was easy for me to license because it was the band that I used to play in university. So I just could give them a message. So similar issues to the library music in that it's not going to be totally tailored to the scene, and at points it might work well, and others it might not. But with this one, it's kind of interesting because the music has its own connotations away in the world away from the film. And it sort of asserts its own style, and it has its own thing that it brings to the film. And this would be more of a point if it was a really famous song that everybody knew, then you'd be experiencing that in a different way. And one thing that I experimented a little bit with in this scene was making it sound as though the music is being played on a radio in the opening scene. So just as George puts down the phone, we're going to hear the music in the background as though it was on a radio there. So in a way, the audience is experiencing the music at the same time as the characters, and we're interacting with the same music. And kind of a cool thing to see. So let's have a little listen to that one. Almost feels a bit like a music video in some ways. What do you think, Duncan?
It definitely changes the kind of power of the scene. The original scene with the no music and the scene with the score that you did. George is kind of like he's not quite in control and he's vulnerable. He's watched, but in that it's like he's kind of the confident one, and he's I don't know. Instead of kind of like approaching the house, it's like he's striding towards it. It's almost like the finale of a film. And I also really like how it changes from diegetic to non-diegetic. You've got the radio and then it kind of turns to like a score. I think that's really good. But yeah, it definitely changes the kind of power and George's vulnerability in the scene. But I think it's interesting.
It totally feels like George is in control, and he is like striding up to that house, and he's not scared at all, which is like very different to the previous version where we were like somebody's going to jump out and George is in danger. So yeah, music is really changing things quite a lot. So that bridges on quite well to the last clip we're going to watch is the one that I composed the music for. And it was interesting to hear you talking a little bit about the George's vulnerability. I know that was definitely a theme that we came back to in our discussion a little bit. I'd be interested at this point to get some idea of what your intentions were for the film and the music in the film, particularly. What was the intentions for the film, and what were the sort of things that you wanted to have in the music?
The intentions of the film, really, and the kind of scene in particular, was just to kind of build suspense in the audience and kind of create a feeling of nervousness. The kind of more the scene goes on, the more vulnerable and kind of in danger George gets, and that's kind of shown through the lighting and the camera angles, which were inspired by like noir cinema and kind of early German expressionist cinema. So just using kind of like the low-key lighting and these kind of extreme angles, and they get more and more harsh as the scene goes on, to kind of make George become increasingly kind of in danger, vulnerable. That was the intention of the scene. And then the film overall was just to kind of create a kind of suspenseful horror, using, as I said, using the techniques of noir and German expression.
Other than that, things that we talk about, I could add in, where we talked a little bit about amplifying this sense that George is pushing further and further into danger, like you were saying. And it's as though he sets out a little bit like he's the hero, but then, and he's there to save somebody who's in danger, but then he's actually becoming maybe the one in danger. But we'll see what happens in the clip. For me, the challenges with this one, with the film, were to have like lighter moments towards the beginning of the scene, which endear George as a character a little bit to the audience before things get a little bit more tense when he gets into the house. And so I'll talk a little bit about what my choices were in the scene. I use this sort of low electronic sound that you're going to hear as George enters the house, and it sort of crescendos louder and louder, and which juxtaposes the theme that I have previous to that, which is a little less tense and maybe a bit more George in his own little world. I really enjoyed the sort of strange angles that you have and things that you were saying from German expressionism. Apparently, that's cool. There's me trying to use film words when I should just stick to music words. But there you go. I wanted to embrace the weirdness a little bit. It was how I was experiencing it. It was slightly absurd and strange in some ways. So I with those tilted angles and things, I kind of felt like George was lost in a maze that was like purposefully leading him astray. So if the music was a little bit strange and misleading, it would be good. And it would sort of set up some enigma codes and some enigmas to be revealed later on. So overall, my intent with the music was to hear a theme for George as he enters the house before there's some sort of dormant, insidious danger of the house, which is going to rise up and sort of swallow that theme whole. That was the goal. We talked a little bit about trying to get the right tone for the scene. We wanted it to be like genuinely unsettling, was something we talked a bit about, that we didn't want it to be like a shock for laughs style of horror. We wanted it to be like this is actually like a little bit freaking people out. Yeah, before we have a listen to the clip, I'll tell you a little bit about what happened when we made the music. For George's theme, I worked with a really great drummer called Oliver Vibrans, who recorded some brushed snare for the score remotely down in London, and that really added to the sort of jazz stylings that we had in this whole thing. And part of that was coming from the Twin Peaks Red Room music that we referenced when we were talking, and also that Taxi Driver theme, of course, where we have this sort of jazz associated with the lone character out at night, vulnerable to the elements of the night. So we brought in some of those jazz stylings. I played a bit of that double bass, there it is, with some snare on it and things like that were brought in, and a bit of piano. So we're contextualizing George, the protagonist, and maybe I was reading into the film, but I kind of thought George was in it one of his own daydreams a little bit. He was sort of seeing himself as this like private investigator, Humphrey Bogart character, and he was off to investigate the scene, sort of like plucked up with his courage. And that's maybe perhaps why we're seeing the film in black and white and we have a jazz score. But that's the way I read into the film. I guess the audience will read into it their own way. Often I see the film as being kind of like the way the character sees themselves a little bit. We're sort of seeing it through the lens of how the character sees themselves a little bit. But that's what I got. Anyways, I'll stop talking and let's have a little look at this clip. Here we go.
Hello?
Great. Okay. So yeah, we got to see a little bit further on into the film in that clip. We got a bit of a longer clip, and I hope you enjoyed hearing the score that we wrote for that one. It was a really great collaboration with Duncan. I really enjoyed. So yeah, is there anything you wanted to say about that score before we move on? I'm just gonna end with some reflections after this, Duncan.
Yeah, I think it works really well. I think the kind of influences that we talked about, especially Taxi Driver, and the way that Bernard Herrmann kind of used the music to show the mindset of the character. I think it works like that. You can kind of see how George begins to get more and more nervous, especially towards the end, where that kind of, I don't know how you describe it, but the kind of noise just kind of overwhelms the scene, and it really highlights how George is realizing that he's not the hero, he's the prey. And I think it just perfectly kind of captures what he'd be thinking and how he'd be feeling. And again, that's something that you'd call, expressionistic, kind of showing how he's feeling using the music.
It's interesting to see how you're extending some of the ideas you already had for the film with this idea that you were taking from German expressionism, and it was an interesting bit of theory that you brought into that. Um, yeah, it was cool to see how you saw the music as being another form of expression in the film, and I think that sums up what we've been trying to say all the way through this, which is that the music is another thing to help you tell the story, and talking with the composer is another person to share your enthusiasm for the film and to go and help you imagine it and make it what you want it to be. Um, which is what we're all here to do. We hope you enjoyed this introduction to film music for filmmakers. You can see Pizza Boy, which was directed by the talented Duncan Forbes in collaboration with Screen Education, at the link in the description below. My latest film in collaboration with director Niamh McEwen is called Flooers and will be screened at the Edinburgh International Book Festival on Thursday, 26th of August. That film saw us collaborate with an author called Ross Sayers, and we helped him adapt his fantastic Scots language novel Daisy on the Outer Line for short film. There'll be a link to that screening in the description below as well. Thank you to Edinburgh International Film Festival and EIFF Youth for inviting me to deliver this workshop. Thank you very much to Duncan Forbes for being involved and answering all of my questions and picking his brain about our collaboration. It was really great to get to work together. Keep your eye out for Duncan in the future. If you'd like to continue the discussion, or if you have any questions about film music, you can find me on all the socials at Simon Toner Music. My last name is Toner. Thank you for watching, and there's no more else to say. We hope you enjoy the festival.